The idea of a zombie game based in old London town is fascinating to me, and it's been a while since we've seen a horror game based in good old Blighty. While Zombi U, or Zombie as it was later known, is another entry in this rather shallow pool. The big problem is that the game was made by Ubisoft, so the depiction of our nation's favourite capital is as authentic as Danny Dyer's acting career. Zombi U started its undeath on a console that shambled through the last generation, the Wii U. In fact, it was a launch title, which is ironic for a system that is aggressively advertised to pastel-coloured shirt-wearing twats, and a hardcore horror game was an odd choice for the opening salvo on a cutesy console. Granted, Ubisoft pulled this trick on the Wii with Red Steel, and the only thing I remember of that game was carpal tunnel syndrome and being completely shite on a rusty bike. Also, Zombi U was the first game I owned on this underappreciated console. Yeah, I bought it on day one after seeing the trailer for the game, back when I had more disposable income than brain cells. A few years later, Zombi U was remastered and ported onto more sensible platforms. While the PC port is bare bones, and more on that later, sadly there was a few casualties in the gameplay department that was cut from the Wii U original, such as the Horde mode where one player controls the zombies and the other must survive the onslaught, and other features that are exclusive to the giant gamepad, like checking your inventory and scanning stuff with your scanny thing, which is a shame, but the PC doesn't have a controller built for orc-sized hands, so I can let it slide. Anyway, you play as this greasy mug. Not that you should care because he's a silent protagonist, and as disposable as a used condom in the River Thames. And if you haven't guessed by now, yes, Zombi U is a survival horror game. Sort of. With a unique mechanic where if you die, you respawn as another random Johnny or Joan. It's a weird middle ground between a roguelike and survival gameplay. It does have a hardcore mode however, where if you do cark it, your save is deleted. But the standard mode of controlling a new character once your original meat puppet kicks the proverbial bucket is odd. Luckily, the story is quite simple. After being guided by some bloke called Prepper to your hideout, your first mission is to retrieve your Bob, or bug out bag, from the previous Ponce who got a deadly case of the itchy tasties. Shortly after this, you are instructed to make your way to the local supermarket, I guess to raid it for cornettos. Then it's off to the Winchester for a quick pint and wait for this all to blow over. Okay, the story of Zombie is forgettable, and I have tried to get invested in the past, but the depth of the story is on par with an average episode of EastEnders. There is biblical undertones with the Black Plague and chasing other Cockney fables, but sorry, I just bored myself to death just saying that. And I have to say, I really love the art style. It brings the dread of walking down the streets of London with the added terror of the undead. LOL, London is a shithole. While it's nice to play the game at a frame rate that doesn't make me want to hurl, I'm struggling to see where this quote remaster has improved, because in my opinion it still looks like a Wii U game with a couple of tattered up textures. In fact, the fuzzy grimy nature of the game adds to its thick atmosphere. But one thing that was driving me crazy was the overuse of bloom on light sources. Now, I get nitpicking on lighting on a predominantly dark game might be dumb, but the bloom can be headache inducing at times and it felt off to me. So for reference, I fired up the Wii U version out of curiosity and wow, there is a big difference. You see there's this dirty filter added to the camera on the Wii U that makes it look like you haven't cleaned your glasses for a week. And on the PC, nothing. Now, the aesthetic here on the Wii U is of personal preference, but to me, this looks so much better. Once I noticed this, my brain would not shut up about it. Why make your game on a platform built for cutting edge graphics look bland? Why take away features that enhance the game? Yes, I can forgive the hardware limited content, but the stuff that modern systems can run with relative ease just screams lazy to me. Okay, I don't have any coding experience and it might have been really hard to implement this feature, but you could have at least tried. Something is better than nothing. Okay, I've been talking about lighting for 2 minutes now and I have to move on for my sanity, but it is nice to feel like I'm not going crazy. In another refreshing twist, Zombie leans more on melee combat over gunplay, and it feels so damn good to cause blunt force trauma to a Zed's head, and using a cricket bat as a melee weapon just adds perfectly to that Britishness. I feel like a cross between Negan and Ian Botham while playing. Sadly, my melee weapon of choice didn't have a cool name like Lucille, so I called mine the Pat Butcher, because she may be dull and made of pine, but she can cause one hell of a headache. The gunplay is pretty punchy too, with a decent selection of shooters to pick, but most of this is limited to the slim amount of ammo you pick up. While the combat does feel great and you have to experience it for yourself, you are also encouraged to sneak around the zombies, because making loud noises will quickly end up in the old bitey bundle. The problem with the stealth approach is that you cannot crouch. In fact, everything you do in this game is contextual, which makes it feel really stiff. So, like most modern games, the sneaky option is tacked on, unfortunately. Not that you would notice, because the game is so thick in atmosphere. Oh, it just throws this blanket of dread over your head and there's no way of taking it off. It's great. From the blood-curdling snarls of a walking corpse, to the erection-throbbing whack of a melee weapon, everything sounds brutal. Which is ironic because what I really loved about the game is its use of silence. Zombie can be a very creepy game at times, even when you're just traversing the town and all you hear is the ambient sound of human misery, kind of like listening to the Joe Rogan podcast. For a game that also advertised itself as a hardcore survival game, the survival gameplay apart from the undecided permadeath is also token. There aren't the usual suspects like making sure that you eat or drink and sleep. But for me, I don't need to be reminded of my dull and boring needs between bouts of view porn and crying. Anyway, back on subject, the gameplay itself is very linear. While you do have the freedom to return to a level that you previously explored, to collect items and open up areas that were previously locked away, the actual maps are very small, which is probably due to the limitations of the original console version. But Zombie's major flaw, however, is its pacing. The first half of this game is very strong, even with a tepid plot. The game moves at a really decent pace. Sadly, the wheels start to fall off at the halfway point, with rampant backtracking and blatant cutting and pasting of some of the maps. Sure, you can blame the limitations of the console once again, but the more I played, the more I realised this game runs out of interesting ideas pretty quickly, and with an ending which I don't want to spoil that left me feeling empty and unsatisfied, which is a shame. To cap it off, Zombi U is still a cool concept, and it's sad to see Ubisoft not expand on this game with a sequel, and missing a golden opportunity to beat the walking corpse of Tom Clancy over the head with a shovel, like they have been doing for the last 5 fucking years. Even with the narrative issues, I still like Zombie. It's a throwback to a bygone age, with some unique gameplay elements you won't find in any other game. And if you're in the mood for a fun, spooky good time, definitely worth checking out.